is seed out there. We won't have communion in our online service this morning. Why, you might ask? Because it's really awkward and almost impossible. But we will have communion in the other two services, the second one this morning and then Monday night as well. So I think we're ready to go without further ado. Why don't we open with a little prayer and then we can get into it. Father, we're in desperate need of you to soften up us on the inside. We are hard naturally stiff-necked, like you used to talk about the Jewish people. But when we look at today's Bible readings, we see that our heart is hard and unreceptive to your message. Only you can soften us up, and it's your word that does it. It's important for us to do a good job understanding the message. But so we ask you to make it understandable, and then we ask you to make us receptive. And then we ask you to make us productive so that we aren't just taking in the message, just consumers of the message, but that we pass it along. And that we need your help for too, for the same reason. So we ask that all in Jesus' name, amen. All right, you've been patient. Let's go to the first of the Bible readings for today, and that's the Matthew 13 one. Now, we were in Matthew 11 last week, so we skipped a chapter 12. But here we go in Matthew 13, and it's got a series of illustrations Jesus uses, stories he tells to make an important point. And you can see this first story is about the farmer who just throws the seed out in his field that he's plowed. And there are a lot of different results. If you go down to verse 18 to 23, it's Jesus' explanation of the story. He doesn't always give us an explanation, but there are a lot of bad things that can happen. He mentions 4 results, and 3 of them are negative results. It doesn't work. The 4th one in verse 23, the last verse, is when it does work. Now, I don't know if that means that 75% of the time people reject the message. I don't know if we have permission to use those kind of statistics based on Jesus' explanation here, but we know that most people end up in hell. And so we know that there's a significant number of people who are so hard on the inside that they won't let the message in, and that's why it fails. So take a look at this message. Jesus is talking about really important stuff, critically life important stuff. So here we go. That same day, Jesus left the house and went down by Lake Galilee to sit on the shore and explain the Bible to people. So a crowd gathered around him. This would be an example of where he didn't go to a building, like on Saturdays when they had church at the Jewish Community Center. Here he's doing an outdoor type of thing. And a crowd gathered around him. There were so many people that he stepped into a boat there and took a seat to teach, because that's how the pastors back in the day, they did the message, they did the sermons sitting. They'd stand to do the Bible readings and then they'd sit to do the sermon. I personally like that method. And all the crowd stood listening from the shore. And he used stories to make his point about a lot of things. He said, a farmer went out to scatter seed in a field. Some of it fell along the path. Birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with rock underneath. They sprouted right away because there was soil, but it wasn't very deep. When the sun came up, They wilted, the little plants, the little sprouts, wilted because their roots weren't deep enough. Other seeds fell among thorny weeds. The thorny weeds grew up and choked off the little sprouts. And other seeds fell on good ground. They grew and produced a crop. Some plants made 100 times more seeds. In other words, the plant produces, the head of the plant is a bunch of other seeds. And he says these seeds that turned into plants produced 100 times more other seeds to get the plant out to other places. And some made 60 times more, and others made 30 times more seeds. If you have ears, think this over. So that's what his people did. Then later on in the day, when the work was done and it was just Jesus and the people that were learning from him, then they asked him for an explanation. And here's the explanation, starting at verse 18. Here's what the story about the farmer means. The seeds that fell along the path are people who hear the message about the kingdom, but they don't understand it. The evil one comes and snatches the message from them. The seed that landed on shallow ground are people who hear the message and at first respond with enthusiasm. They don't let the message sink deep inside them. And as soon as life gets hard or the message gets them into trouble, they give up. The seeds that fell among thorny weeds are also people who hear the message, but their worries about all they need for their lives and lies about what wealth can do choke out God's message and nothing comes of it. But the seed that landed on good ground are people who hear and understand God's message. And this people end up productive. Some produce as much as 100 times more, some others 60 times more, and others 30 times more. So the point is that it's not the ground itself that's responsible for the growth. You know, the seed technically dies, and its decomposition is what produces the sprout. And whether the sprout is able to survive in the ground, that's up to God. So God's the one that makes the whole growing process works. If he doesn't bless that seed, then it just stays a dead seed and nothing happens. No matter how much you water it, no matter how much you fertilize it, cultivate it, nothing. And in the same way, once the seed starts growing, that's on God if he's going to make it a productive plant. So many things can happen to make it unproductive. So again, everything depends on him. And then are you ready for the second Bible section? You can see that's Acts 18. And it's a significant part of that chapter. And when we look at it, you're going to see that it's going to be very tempting. Paul's doing work in the southern part of Greece. He's in Europe and he's down by Athens, but there's a little peninsula that comes off, and here, this map will help you. You can see over on the left side of the map that when you get down to southern Greece, there by Athens, you have to go across a little land bridge, and then you reach what was the biggest population center in Greece, either southern Greece or northern Greece, and that is Corinth. So Paul, the missionary, and his team thought, we're going to do great here because there's so many people and a large Jewish community center, because a lot of Jewish people live there. And that's the way Paul did it, is he'd go to these Jewish community centers to introduce himself to the Jewish community and any non-Jewish people that were coming to Jewish services to hear the Jewish Bible. the Old Testament. And normally what happens is those Jewish people latch on pretty hard, get excited about hearing the rest of the story, how God did send the Messiah, how it was Jesus, how he did everything God wanted him to do. But this time, shocking lack of success. He really is confused about this. And nothing happens until God makes the message work on the people in this massive city of Corinth, very modern, up-to-date city. So here we go. I hope that helps the background. After this, Paul left Athens, where, and I should mention too, when you read the Athens stuff before that, that was a kind of a dismal failure too. He didn't make any headway in Athens, a city we're much more familiar with. That was a disaster. So he went on to Corinth thinking, well, this will be better. And he went to the city of Corinth. And in Corinth, he met a Jewish man named Aquila and his wife Priscilla. Aquila had been born in the Pontus area. And they had recently come from Italy because Emperor Claudius had ordered all Jews out of Rome. Paul went to visit them. They made tents for a living, as he did. So he stayed with them and they worked together. Every Saturday, worship day for Jews, Paul would discuss the Old Testament in the Jewish Community Center in Corinth. He tried to bring to Jesus Jews and non-Jews who'd become Jewish. After Silas and Timothy arrived from northern Greece, they were up there working with those groups in Berea, Philippi, and so on, Thessalonica. Then Paul devoted all of his time to teaching God's word. And he didn't do his leather working stuff. He didn't do his tent making stuff. He tried to prove to Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. But they, at the Jewish Community Center, turned against him and said insulting things about him. So Paul shook their dust from his clothes and told them, when God sends you to suffer forever, it will be your own fault. I've done all I can do. So from now on, I'm going to go to people who are not Jewish in Corinth there. So Paul quit teaching at the Jewish Community Center and used the home of a man named Titius Justus, who was a convert to Judaism. He lived next door to the Jewish Community Center. And the Community Center's president, Crispus, and all the people at his house had come to believe in the Lord. So they'd become Christians. And so they would go next door to this Justus guy's house to study the Bible and learn more of what Jesus had taught. And many others in Corinth who heard Paul believed and received baptism. One night, Paul saw the Lord telling him, don't be afraid to speak out. Don't give up. I'm with you. No one will attack you or harm you. I have many people in this city. So it wasn't as hopeless as he had first thought. He just had to keep working. So he lived in Corinth for a year and a half. That's pretty long for this missionary. And taught them God's message, because God always made the message work much quicker in other major metropolitan areas. He was in central Turkey there. You can see in the middle of the screen on the map. And then over in Europe, in Philippi, it was quicker. In Thessalonica, it was quicker. In Berea, it was quicker. Then in southern Greece, it was a disaster. In Athens, and it didn't seem to be going so well in Corinth. But God made it work. And that's the message. And then we got our Old Testament section for today, which is just 2 verses. They're not very long. And it's God talking. You can tell that from the words right before this. We don't have always that context. If you're looking at your electronic Bible, then you've got verses before and after these two verses that we're going to look at. So then you can see who's doing the talking. It's Yahweh doing the talking. And you can see he's talking about how he does the most unpredictable things. He can turn somebody who is a confirmed Bible hater or Jesus hater or not believe in the only real God hater, and he can make them into actual believers. And it doesn't take a special performance by the person who brings them the message. It could be a child. It could be something he remembers reading or hearing from the Bible in some other place. But God says the most unlikely people are going to get the message because the message itself has a supernatural power to it. Take a look. Rain and snow come down from the sky. They don't go back up until they water the ground. They make crops sprout and grow. So they produce seed for farmers and food for people to eat. The message I, Yahweh, speak is like the rain and snow. It won't come back to me without results. It will do whatever I plan for it. It will achieve whatever I send it to do. In other words, it's going to work. In some cases where it doesn't seem like anything happened ever, the word worked too, because it got to people and at least explained the truth about why we need the news about Jesus. So that's all part of what God wants when he makes his message work. You see there's a Bible there, but that's not the only way God gets his word out, right? If you don't have a Bible in front of you, but you say it to somebody else, that's God's word. If they hear it on a tape or something like that, if they hear it in a song, it's God's word and it works, even though it's not a direct quotation from the Bible. So God presents his word in so many ways to all kinds of different people. And when it works, that's a miracle that God alone deserves the credit for. Here's something I just ran across this week, that there was a flu pandemic in 1918 and it went into 1919, 15 months. And this flu epidemic was unbelievable. 50 million people died worldwide in 1918, 1919, 50 million people. And here in America, 675,000 Americans died. That's almost a million Americans. Just to compare, for instance, we had 50 million people die of the flu in 1918, 1919. With the COVID crisis, we haven't even had 1 million people die yet. So this is just what we're dealing with now is just a fraction of what people dealt with in a much more traumatic event that had cataclysmic, dismal results for a ton of people worldwide. Now, of course, we know that if 650,000 people died, while it's a much smaller number compared to the flu in 1918, we know each one of those people meant something to somebody else. So it's an incredibly tragic thing, even though the numbers aren't as severe as they have been in the past. 150,000 people died in America from the COVID. So this 150,000 is our number now that have died. And remember, if you compare that to the flu in 1918 or 19, that's a kind of a small number too. But again, it doesn't really matter when people are all dying around the same time. The point is that every time that death strikes individual or in a family pulls somebody out of that family, that is a horrifying thing. Death, even though it looks like when you're looking at the body, it doesn't look like anything happened because the person looks natural and normal. We can even dress them up and put makeup on them to make them look like nothing is wrong at all. But there is nobody inside that body. That to cause the person's body to die, God pulls the person's body, soul, out of their body. The soul is who that person is. It's their personality. And that person stays alive even when God makes their body die, but God takes them either right away to heaven, or in the majority of cases, they suffer in a completely different place. All of us are kind of like what our Bible reading's talking about. We're all kind of like the crop that God planted in this world. We're alive now, but we do not know when he's going to call our number. But the point is, whether he uses a natural disaster like flooding, tornado, earthquake, an epidemic, when God calls our number, that's our individual harvest time. And so he harvests a whole bunch of people at the same time, like a fire or something like that, or an epidemic. But one day he's going to harvest every single person. And so one of the things that he's reminding us about in this Bible section is that in the same way that he sends the sun and rain to make crops, their purpose is a harvest. And the same thing is true when we talk about God's word. It's to produce a crop, and then there will be a harvest. So God makes the final call on how much time an individual or a group get to enjoy their life here. And their life here, you can define it as successful if they get exposure to God's word and it does its amazing work inside. God's counting his word as working, even when people get exposure to it and they reject the message. That's his word working too. Anytime that God gives us here to receive any kind of exposure from his supernatural message that he makes come into our lives, in our world here, anytime that we get that, any second of life here is the opposite of what we each deserve. That's very important to understand. The truth is, we don't even deserve 1 second of life here. If God struck us, our bodies dead inside of our mother's womb, we had time. He gave us time, but he didn't give us much, but it's still way more than we deserve because of the sin that defines our personalities now and our activities and the stuff we say. God does not owe us anything except the immediate sentence that he has the right to reserve. So we really counted every second of our time here as valuable time that God gives for us to hear the message, for it to work on us, and for us to be seeds that pass the message on. You heard that in the first Bible reading for today. He talked about it twice. Some plants made 100 times more seeds, and some made 60 times more, and others made 30 times more. Now, those differences may be because of how much time they got on earth, and other times it's got to do with our maturity as Christians. Sometimes we're not acting very grown up as Christians, and we're not on the same plan that God has us, wants us to be on. So right in this same chapter of Isaiah 55, right in the verses right before it, you can see this is Isaiah 55, verse 8, and we're in verse 10. Yahweh says, I don't think the way you do, and I don't do things the way you do. Boy, that is a good thing, because if it was up to us, we wouldn't give ourselves any chance to hear any kind of message or to have it work inside of anyone. We wouldn't give them a chance. But the God of the Bible, this Yahweh, the 1 + 1 + 1 = 1 God who gave us the Bible, he doesn't do things the way we do. He got his message out, and he got it out to everybody, regardless of whether they deserved it or not. Adam and Eve at the beginning, after they sinned and failed miserably and wrecked everything in the whole universe by what they did, God shouldn't have given them the message, but he did anyways. And that is really good news for us. It's kind of combined with bad news, but we're sure glad that God continues to cause a crop that his word is the seed and produces, right? So he mentions this in verse 10, that the precipitation that he makes fall, which we're well aware of today. If you're living somewhere not around here, we really got dumped on yesterday, and it's still some potential for it today. We got a lot today already. The wetness comes from the sky. That's a gift from God that we don't often appreciate. Sure didn't maybe the last couple of days. But then what it always does is it always evaporates and goes back to where it came from. It mentions that in the second line in our Bible reading, that rain and snow come down from the sky and they don't go back up until they water the ground, but they do go back up. In other words, it kind of is a reminder to us that it's God who keeps physical life going here. He's the one that is responsible for how much time we get. You can eat as much as you want and as healthy as you want, but when he says the time is up, it really is up. And so it's a miraculous thing, the way he even produces food for us to eat. It comes out of dead ground from a dead seed. And it only happens because God commands the seed to grow new life where there wasn't any life before, in the dead seed itself or in the ground. God's the one who deserves credit when we get food. And look at what he says here in the chapter right before chapter 55, the one we're looking at. He says in verse 10 that mountains may move and hills may shake. And when that sort of thing happens, that's when people die. Earthquakes are reminding us about how one day God's going to shake the whole world and the universe completely apart. And that's going to be the biggest mass gathering or harvest that God makes of everybody. So every time we see an earthquake or feel an earthquake or hear news about earthquakes, God wants us to remember we only got a little bit of time. He wants to use what do we call that when we press the button on our alarm clock and then it gives a wake-up call. I got an assistant today, so this is really good. He gives us wake-up calls when he makes there be earthquakes, when we see stuff up in the sky during the day or night, like, blood red moons, eclipses of the sun and the moon and the stars. Those are reminding us, giving us valuable reminders. You don't have forever to take seriously what God says and get involved in the productiveness that he wants us to have. And then he goes on, he says, my kindness for sinners is never going to end. His time that he gives us in this world is going to end. But while we're here, he promises to give us lots of things, the opposite of which we don't deserve. He promises to give us food. But even more important than that, he promises that he's going to keep getting his message out to people, which is really easy to forget and write off, take for granted. In this chapter 55, and early in the chapter, he says, listen to me and do what I say. In other words, the opposite of listening to him and doing what he says is to just let it go in one ear and out the other. He says, if you do that, you're not going to enjoy the best opportunity that I give people, which is to feed on this amazing news, the truth of what he tells us in the Bible. He says, pay close attention. Come to me and you will survive. I promise you life that never ends. So that's what he's guaranteeing us. A lot of the reason that people are afraid in the pandemic that we're living through now is they're afraid they're going to get it, and that's going to be the end of their life. This is another wake-up call from God that tells us, you're not remembering what the Bible claims about when your body quits function, and you need to think that through a lot better and remember why God put you here, not to keep away from as many people as possible, but to get the message out, even if it might mean something bad happens to you. You're not going to die. Look at the way God at the beginning of the world just made all of a sudden vegetation erupt out of the ground, and instantly on a dry earth, dry ground that didn't have any life forms at all, he made all kinds of various life forms happen. He made trees, and he made vegetation, plants and stuff like that. He made flowers and all kinds of things that are just exist to be beautiful to look at. And he's the one that designed the reproductive system, that involved bees going around and pollinating different plants so that they could continue. God just made that happen instantaneously. His word may take longer than that to work inside of a human being that's stubborn and hard and unwilling to give it a chance. Right after people sinned, and it was amazing the transformation that happened to Adam and Eve. They went from being literally without sin, in God's image, the only ones in this world who that happened to. They went from that to being exactly like Satan, in the image of Satan. And that's the reason why we got the problems, even us that are Christians, letting it sink in and actually doing its work of changing us from what comes natural to be selfish, skeptical about everything God says, and so on. And God told these people the good news about Jesus, Genesis 3:15, about how his descendant was going to come from the family of human beings. And God made the tree of life there, which gave eternal life. After people sinned, he kicked them out of the garden, away from that tree of life. But that tree of life comes back to us when God plants his word inside of us, when he lets it fall on us. He doesn't want it to fall on deaf ears. He wants us to hear it because we really need it. Just because we once knew the message doesn't mean we don't need it anymore. Look what he says here in the chapter right before this. My promise to give you peace will never change, says Yahweh. He gives us the opposite of what we deserve. See, it's always a reminder that we always think there's something about us that makes God's word work. And there isn't anything about us that makes God's word work. Not any prayer we made to God, not any decision we made to invite him into our heart. There was nothing that we did that made the word work. So the seed is the word of God. That's the way God gives us a second chance. Some people think, their second chance comes from a shot, an inoculation, a vaccination, and that's their second chance. If you can keep a disease from getting to you, but remember, God still can overrule all that stuff very easy. The way he gives us a real second chance is when we get to hear about the way he gave us the gift of life that never ends. And that happens because of the hand that spread the seed. I like this picture because it doesn't just show a farmer throwing seed out there, but it shows that the farmer is God himself. It's Jesus, the human being that came to earn us what we could never have achieved on our own. A record of total holiness with God. And then he applied that to your individual account. I don't know. I don't care who it is that's hearing this message. He applied it to your account. And then he had Jesus serve our ultimate sentence. And that's why that hand at the wrist there has a hole in it, because those are the spikes from the nails that Jesus allowed them to put there. That's the news that he's spreading to us. Nothing that happens to you is punishment from God. There may be some consequences that come with being stupid, not listening to God, not doing what he says, but God blesses us with the news about Jesus serving our forever punishment sentence. And that is news that never gets old. In the Old Testament, anyone can find promises about what the Messiah would do in our place. The main message of the Old Testament, where there's no word Jesus in there, the main message of the Old Testament is all about Jesus. If you don't believe that, you can read the first part of this chapter 55. If you still got your Bible open or your app open, you can read the beginning part of this chapter and you can see it's talking about Jesus. And if you go 2 chapters back, you'd be in Isaiah 53. It's just glaring. It's just dripping with the news about Jesus. So God has always wanted people from the very beginning. He had the message given to the very first sinners, and then Moses, he had it put in writing for the news about Jesus that would be there for people. He's always wanted people to hear the message, and he's always gotten to people with the message. And when it succeeds, that's a tribute to him. And even though we always want to take the credit and horn in on it, it's not a credit to us. We can pass the message along. Now, human rejection, which happens most of the time, doesn't mean that God's promises and power didn't work. It's God's message is always going to work. It may not work the way we like it, and it may not take place as quick as we'd like it, but God's word always works, even if it works to just remind people of the truth about why they need the news about Jesus. I like this. The only weapon that Satan is most afraid of is God's word. Now, he doesn't have to work very hard on us, because there's a part of us that is dismissive of anything that has to do with God. I know when I go to church and just have to sit there and listen because there's a different pastor talking, I can turn my mind off so easy. Nobody knows I'm turning my mind off because I just look like I'm sitting there paying attention like everybody else, but I'm not. And so we're in tandem with Satan on trying to rub this message out, just dismiss it. But when we use God's word, it's going to do powerful things in our heads. And it's going to do powerful things in the deepest parts of who we are. It's going to work because it's going to alert us to what's messed up about us. It's going to show us the news about Jesus, and it's going to make us want to do, even though we don't have to. He's going to make us want to do things that are going to be helpful in getting the message out to more people. So this is really important. God's not putting any of it, leaving any of it up to us. He's getting the message out through his people that he makes want to get the message out, and it's going to work, even though what we see a lot of times seems frustrating and unproductive. Let's close with a prayer. Father, we're grateful for the fact that you didn't give up on us. Because you know your word works, it doesn't matter what lost causes we are. You still got the message out to us. In most of our cases, what happened is that you got the message out to our parents, who then got the message to us. They had us baptized, and that's the message. There's words that go with that water, just like there is in the Lord's Supper. There's words that go with the wheat and the wine that reassure us of the truths your written word says, that you got rid of our sins by nailing them onto Jesus. And unescapable, he had to take the punishment in our place. We're so grateful for that news, and we want to do better at being more productive for you. We'd like to be people who bring 100 times more of the people that we get to contact to the news about Jesus. We don't want to be the 30 or the person who buried their message in the ground and never shared it with anybody. So help us with that. Only you can do that. As the rest of today goes and into Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, help everybody we meet help us look at them different. We ask this in Jesus' name. So now receive and believe the blessing of the Lord himself to you that Jesus earned for us with his lifetime on earth as our body double, and with his damnation death on the cross where he served our sentence. And so the Lord is all the time giving you his blessing, and he's protecting you all the time too. The Lord is making his face shine or smile on you because he has nothing against you. He put it all on Jesus, and he's being gracious to you, the opposite of what we deserve. The Lord's looking on you with his favor, and he is giving you all the time his peace.